it's a complicated process, and hopefully there are some things on the DLGF side that we've done that make it a little easier for the county auditor. As Dan alluded to, there's kind of a whole section of this statute that we haven't really talked about yet. So I'll pull up the, first off, our goals in implementing this, as you can imagine, it's a complicated statute and a complicated process. So when we met with AOS to try to determine how we were going to administer this, we had some goals in mind. One of our goals was to, can everybody hear me? Is that better? Okay. You should, I think.
It will be online, and you've got handouts that should have been passed out. So, and I'm sure they couldn't hear that, so you might have to repeat what I said.
The presentation is online, and there should be handouts around the room. So our goals in implementing the statute, believe it or not, was to minimize the impact to the county auditors in some sections where we felt like we could. We wanted to maintain as much as possible the current abstract process with AOS, and then try to avoid changes to the software vendors to handle some of the distribution aspects that we'll talk about later in the presentation. And then also, these changes require us to modify some of our budget review process. So this is the statute that provides for protected taxes. The first section here, you can see it talks about the total revenue loss you need to grab that one? Or? No. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. The total revenue loss from the credits under that section 7 and 7.5, as Dan mentioned, that's only the 1, 2, and 3 caps. That's not the over 65. And then the next sections below that, it states that the reduction because of protected taxes may be allocated in the amounts determined by the political subdivision using a combination of unprotected taxes from funds that the subdivision has. So that's where there was a determination between Auditor Estate's Office and DLGF on how we were going to administer this. And Dan talked about how AOS is going to administer this by adjusting in a uniform manner all of the distribution rates because of protected taxes. Now, it's important to note that political subdivisions have the ability to reallocate what you've distributed. And that's what we're going to talk about. And that's more of the DLGF portion of the statute. So the actual allocation, because of protected taxes, will occur after settlement and distribution. So county auditors will not need to get information from each of their political subdivisions on how they want these taxes allocated. As Dan described, that'll be uniform in a proportional way, and that will then be reflected on the county abstract. After the county abstract and the circuit breaker adjusted rates are approved, DLGF then creates a fund-by-fund breakdown of all the circuit breaker losses. You may have seen this past year. This was something new in statute, that the DLGF is required to provide this. As we went through this process this year, we created a software application that loads the abstracts and is able to produce those reports on a fund-by-fund level. I know we got a lot of questions on those reports this past year, as it took us some time to develop. Next year, specifically with this protected taxes statute, those reports will be coming out very soon after your county abstract is approved by AOS. using the information in that circuit breaker report, the fiscal body of each taxing unit can determine whether or not the credits need to be shifted. So as Dan mentioned, your local units then have the ability to, if it's a township and they have two unprotected funds, they have a township assistance fund and a general fund, they can then determine that they don't want to take any circuit breaker credits on their general fund. They want to shift those circuit breaker credits to their township assistance fund. But again, that happens after distribution, and that's not a decision that you have to take account for. However, the complicated part comes in the DLGF budget review, and how that determination is then communicated back to the department. So if a taxing unit determines that a different allocation is necessary, they will need to adopt an ordinance and resolution, as well as fill out a DLGF prescribed form that will be on Gateway to tell us where each unit is shifting their circuit breaker credits. So again, each unit is responsible for their own share of that. So the county auditor, as the county auditor, you will have to account for that if your unit wants to shift protected taxes around, but you won't have to take account for any of your other taxing units. And again, we will be providing sample ordinances and resolutions, as it gets closer. Yeah.
I do have one question.
Sure.
We have in our county, we have one school that the county council has to adopt their budget because they're in a 20 school board. So in this scenario, if they want, if the school wants to shift the funds, I assume that their school board would have to recommend that the county council is actually the adopting body. Is that correct?
That's a good question. The question for everyone was on some of these appointed units. The question was specifically on a school board where it's an entirely appointed school board. Is it the school that makes that determination or the county? And I'm actually not sure. I'd have to go back to the statute and look at it. I think it just says fiscal body. I don't know if it refers back to the fiscal body that adopted the budget, but that's something we'll certainly have to follow up with. But yeah, that's a good point. That will be an added complication. So the process in Gateway to submit your reallocations of protected taxes and the circuit breakers, that will be somewhat similar. We've drawn a correlation between that process and the additional appropriations process, where we may receive, we haven't yet determined if we're going to have to receive the resolution or the ordinance, but the form that you provide to us in Gateway will be, the final product that we will then use to work with your next year's budgets. So it will be important to make sure that that gets in Gateway. Additionally, we will probably have every unit go in and verify that they have not changed. So we also know, so if you haven't reallocated from the uniform application as received from the county abstract, if that's the allocation you maintained, we'll also want confirmation of that. So then the question becomes, how do the local units reallocate those funds? How are they going to be able to accomplish that? And it's very important that this slide number 10 is followed, and we'll be issuing this more guidance along this as it gets closer. But immediately after distribution and no later than June 30, the fiscal officer of the unit needs to transfer the property tax revenue between unprotected funds according to the allocation specified in the resolution or ordinance. So that's very important that that happens before June 30, so that when we start our budget review, as Courtney will discuss later, that we have actual June 30 cash balances. So. It's also important to note that the allocation as adopted in the ordinance, will apply to both the June and December distributions of property taxes. So again, immediately with the December distribution, immediately after that distribution, or no later than December 31st, the taxing unit's fiscal officer will have to transfer those funds again so that we have accurate December 31 cash balances. So I'm now going to turn it over to Courtney to talk about how this will also impact the budget review process. Question? I'm sorry. I didn't- Fall estimates. No, I think the question was how will that impact fall estimates? I think it's important to maintain that, you know, you're going to continue to distribute according to your abstract and the distributional rates that are included there. You know, any shifting is going to happen after distribution, so that applies to both the estimates and the main distribution.
All right. All right. When Eric and I were putting together this presentation, oh, that's not good. I kind of like to think of this presentation, the first half, what Eric was covering was what do we know? Now I'm going to go ahead and do what don't we know, because there's a lot that we don't know yet. And in fact, both, you know, we've already had some good questions here on how are we going to handle this? How are we going to handle that? There's a lot we have not figured out. So I'm here to not provide you any answers. But let's see, can I get out of that? Making it worse. Well, yeah, can you get rid of that? Okay. So kind of to sum up what Eric had just said, what do we know? Taxing units will be allowed to move money post-distribution. In order to do that, they are going to have an official action, ordinance, resolution, and they are going to have to report that information to us on Gateway. That's kind of where it ends. So where I'm going to take the rest of this presentation is into what that will mean for budget purposes. Obviously, as taxing units are moving money around, that will impact how we do our budgets. So be prepared that you may start to see some additional guidance coming out next year for our budget process. For the most part, my goal would be to try to preserve the integrity of the process that we currently have in place as much as possible, but it may need to be modified, or at least at the minimum some additional guidance provided to account for some of these further adjustments. Now this will be for 2015 will be the first year that you would see this type of implication. So 2014 budgets, don't worry about it. Actually, I also think Commissioner Vincent was here yesterday mentioning that we've already started to work on 2014 budgets. So I just am very proud of that, very excited about that. So wanted to mention that. You should start to actually see some budgets coming out of the DLGF fairly soon. So, all right. You go ahead. I don't know if this is working or not. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight areas that we don't have the final answer on. The first one is going to be June 30 cash balance. So specifically, we're looking at the Form 4B, line 6. Currently, we use the actual cash balance, including cash and investments. We anticipate, as of right now, I would anticipate that that will stay the same. What that does mean is that if you have a taxing unit that has shifted money around post-distribution, we would be using a post-transfer cash balance. That we'll see as we walk through this how that can have some additional implications. But that is currently our plan. That's why our initial plan on the guidelines would be to indicate that they should be transferring these dollars by June 30th. That also means, of course, we're going to have a few units that we're supposed to transfer by June 30th and don't, so we will have some additional guidance on that. Typically, when we encounter that, we will put those dollars onto the line 4A or the line 4B on your Form 4B just to account for the fact that that additional transfer should have occurred. Another line that we are going to be figuring out, and this line in and of itself causes a lot of contention, even currently. So we're really just adding yet another complexity onto this particular item. This would be December tax collections. This is your Form 4B, your line 7. The way that the DLGF currently treats this line for budget order process is as follows. For a levy-controlled fund or a rate-controlled fund, we are going to use the lesser of abstract levy minus June distribution, or certified levy minus June distribution. So for all of those funds, we go through each year and we do that calculation, come up with the lesser amount, and we say, here's the December tax collections that we're going to plug into our budget review. It's slightly different for debt service funds in that we do not use the abstract levy. We only will use certified levy minus June distributions. The reason for that is that because debt service is a need-driven fund, we do not want to artificially increase the levy, essentially to allow the taxing unit to make up for circuit breaker losses in their debt service fund. Obviously, as we move into protected taxes, the concept of circuit breaker losses in their debt service funds starts to go away. So here, again, certified levy minus June distribution is really probably still what we will continue to look at for debt service funds. Under protected taxes, though, especially for those levy-controlled and those rate-controlled funds, there's a couple of numbers that previously we had that start to become a lot more in flux. Those numbers specifically would be your abstract levies and your June distributions. If you have a unit that has transferred money around post-distribution, then that abstract levy may not be a really valid number for us to use in our calculation. Same thing with that June distribution. The amount that you actually distributed and you report to us on the Form 22, that's not necessarily their final dollar amount for the June distribution. Could be either higher or lower. So this is an issue that we're going to be working out. How are we going to figure out what we should actually be putting on that line 7 for December tax collections? And that really gets back to your same question of what do we do for the fall estimates? I hate to tell you, but I don't know yet. We will figure this out. If you all have suggestions, since you have very detailed knowledge of this process, certainly we would welcome any suggestions as to how to proceed with this. We just have a lot of competing goals on here. So we would like to try to minimize the changes to our budget process, but ultimately we have to ensure that we are having accurate budgets, and that really is the most important thing to us. We want to make sure we are correctly accounting for it and providing accurate levies. So one thing to consider, and these are some considerations that I'm looking at as we're trying to decide where we head with this, would be what is the impact on your individual fund levies. So suppose you have a situation where you have decided that a particular fund should take a larger circuit breaker hit than came out during distribution. That's fine. You go through, you do your ordinance, your resolution, you tell us that that's what's going to happen, and you transfer the money. So for our purposes then, as we begin our budget review, you now have a lower June 30 cash balance than you would have had otherwise. You also will now have a lower December tax collection, because when you make the determination that you're going to impact your June distribution, that same decision will be applied to December. So it's a one-time shot to say, here's how we want to shift our money around for this year. Because of that, you will be showing significantly less revenue on your Form 4B, thereby driving up the tax levy of that particular fund. So as we start to build this year over year, where we can possibly be heading is that individual fund levies will start to swing. You could encounter a situation where your fund levies are going high in one year, or an individual fund levy is going high in one year, and then the next year, depending on the decision as to how to allocate the circuit breakers, it could go low the next year. Overall, you're still within your maximum levy. So unit level, you still have the same levy controls, maximum levies, and your debt service funds, they're now protected, and so again, they're just need driven. We're going to look at the need, and that's all you will be receiving. But fund by fund, we could start to go down this process of seeing significant swings in fund levies. Here's why that concerns me. The first would be for the purposes of taxing units. This is just a whole nother level of complexity for local government budgeting. And even as I'm looking at here with, in my opinion, some of the folks that know this process better than anyone else in the state, I can see all of you kind of saying, wow, this is going to be hard. Now imagine taking that to one of your townships and telling them, here's how you have to do this. So, this is definitely going to be more and more complex. And now we also have a situation where your taxing units each year need to go through all of the different reports and all the information that they're provided and decide whether or not to shift their allocation. And certainly there can be some additional implications from that. So local government budgeting overall has the potential to become more complicated. Even if we're able to keep our forms the way that they currently are, and I still think at a local level, you have many more complex decisions to make. The other area where it concerns me would be the impact to taxpayers. Generally, as we look at budget documents, we generally think of your budget document as an indication of your taxing unit's policies and what it's placing its priorities towards. If we now are entering a situation where year over year, certain funds may either have a high tax levy one year or then a low tax levy the next year, that's going to be very confusing for taxpayers to understand why that is and really what is the priorities of that individual taxing unit. So I'm not exactly pleased about that issue either. I think we do still need to get to a point where these budget documents can provide some type of an indication as to what your taxing unit is interested in, what you're funding, and what's important. So that's why I kind of say, I don't know what these final answers are. These are some of the struggles that we are currently working on. I think some of the other steps along the way, it's certainly good that Dan knows where he's headed and AOS knows where they're headed with it. We do know that we probably will have some additional gateway components that we will be putting into place, but next spring, what you will be seeing from us is additional guidance on this. As we work through all of these issues and kind of try to play through as many scenarios as possible, we will be issuing additional guidance. Certainly we will do our best to educate everyone as much as possible to try to take away some of the complexities associated with this. And then also, as you see up here, for the next steps, we will be making those gateway modifications that we already anticipate so that we will have that information to allow us to integrate it into our budget review. So with that, again, just our contact information, and if you do have questions, please feel free to contact us. I will, while Debbie's walking up here, I will go ahead and answer a question that I received from my first presentation.